So my name's Mel Kelly. I have been in talent acquisition for 13 years. So I set up my business last year following redundancy. So I decided to go out on my own. I was at PwC for nearly 7 years, and
Oh,
then
wow.
prior to that, I worked in a hospitality business in Pall Mall in London, and then I worked for the TUI Group for also about 5 years as a recruitment manager as well. And so um, part of my time in PwC was working within mergers and acquisitions and advising clients on their recruitment strategies to kind of scale recruitment to then usually sell their businesses or create them, get them ready for standing up as a new entity, basically.
hmm
And so, kind of taking my internal and external experience into MCO Talent Advisory, and what I do is kind of speak with internal functions and look to improve and optimize what they're doing internally, basically. Away from traditional recruitment, but it's kind of saying, well, actually, don't need to always add to the team or outsource everything and spend lots of money. A lot of it is
hmm
kind of optimizing what you've already got and then creating strategies um, fit to what their business goals are, basically. So, welcome to the session. So, today we're going to be talking about how you're going to reduce your recruitment costs um, whilst not impacting candidate quality. So, we'll go through, where typically the biggest spends are, the impact that that has not only on recruitment direct costs, but indirect costs and team impacts as well. The power of the process. So what we were just saying a minute ago about optimizing and improving efficiencies within your processes can really have a positive effect on your bottom line. Um, Quick wins for good quality candidates. I've got a case study if I've got time to go through that of what I did with a business to reduce their hiring spend by 100 grand. And then we'll do some Q&A. Yesterday or the day before, I did a poll and asked people where they were spending the most money. The results of that poll were that 60% of voters said that the main cost of recruitment was on bad hires and subsequent rehiring costs, etc., and the impact that it had on their teams. 20% of the biggest cost was in agencies, and then 15% was due to inefficient processes. It just goes to show the impact that rushing recruitment, not having the right processes in place can really impact you down the line with, 60% of people saying their bad hires just cost them so much money. And when I was doing some research into this, it costs 33% of an average salary to replace an employee. And so that's to replace them, not all the money that you've just spent hiring the wrong person. And so when you start looking at, all those things adding up, you're looking at, nearly 70% of someone's of that one position salary to hire and then rehire. So it's really important that we're kind of trying to avoid that at all costs. And then other areas of spending is if you've got a poor employer brand, then typically you will pay 10% higher salary because you're having to compete in a really competitive market. And if your employer brand isn't great and you don't shout about the great things that you do, people are a little bit unsure about what you do or how they envision themselves working there, then generally to get them over the line, companies are typically having to pay 10% higher salaries than those of their competitors that might have stronger employer brand. And so, there's a lot of benefit in investing a bit more money in that side of things. The average daily cost of a vacancy is around £500. I've got the sources for all this information, so if anyone wants me to share any of the articles with you, I'm more than happy to do so. I've read a lot, so if you like reading insight articles, then I will share them with you. The typical cost of a hire is £6,100. And so that's just your direct recruitment cost. So that's not doing any outsourcing at all. And so if you start layering agencies on top of this at 15 to 30% of a salary, then again, your costs are going to really, really skyrocket. You need to start hiring smarter, not just cheaper, because you need to look at like the long-term benefit. And so some of the things that I'm going to talk to you about today is improving what you've already got, but also where you might need to invest a little bit of money up front, but your long-term return is going to be a lot better. as I said, we've got internal recruitment costs, external recruitment costs, and then you've got kind of indirect costs. And so your internal recruitment costs that you're looking at are your recruitment operational costs, so any ATS, AI assessment tools that you've invested in and are using. You might use referral programs, travel expenses for candidates if you ask them to go into offices for interviews, different career platforms on your website, advertising spend, employer brand and attraction, and then just the salaries of the people within your recruitment team, but also in your hiring team as well. And then you've got your temp contingent, which I've spelt wrong, which is funny, and traditional agencies and outsourcing models, and then so those are your obvious costs. And when you think about recruitment, they're the typical things that you're thinking of. But the wider cost impacts are, you're wasting hiring, onboarding and training costs every time that you're not getting the right hire in. You waste hiring manager time, recruitment time, you get increased staff attrition. So when you have someone that doesn't fit or is misaligned with culture and values, they generally bring the morale of the rest of the team down. People don't want to work in that team anymore because it's shifted so much. There can be impacts to productivity that, not just having the wrong person in the team, but you've usually got someone else in the team doing the training and the development of that person. And so the other half of that trainer's role is now being spent training up someone. So, you're losing productivity there, and you're losing the productivity of having someone new in the team. And typically it takes about 28 weeks for someone to become, fully competent in their role and where they're starting to be productive, generate revenue, if that's the type of role that they're in. You've got extended advertising costs, and it's just, if you're not advertising in the right places, if you're just throwing money at everything, then it's generally going to impact your time to hire, which then again wastes more time. And then if you get the wrong hire, you're going to have repeated recruitment fees. And so there's quite a lot of wider impact to a business. And so I think we need to really, as recruitment and HR teams and learning and development teams, is working really collaboratively to look at the end-to-end recruitment process and onboarding, to think about where we can kind of come together, make sure that we feel like we're going out to market with the right things, that we're going to bring in the right people, use the right assessments, and then have a slick onboarding process. So there's a number of things that can kind of impact our costs here. And so going into the power of your process. So I always talk about process internally. The Harvard Business Review stated that 80% of employee turnover is due to bad hiring decisions, and 45% of bad hires are attributed to a lack of process. So it does always surprise me when I'm working with clients that there's not huge amounts of focus within that process. Usually it just is what it is. We've always done it that way, and we make do, and so on and so forth. But for me, I think it's important to break down your process into like these three parts. And so if you're looking at your attraction and application, depending on the size of your business, obviously, if you're a startup, you might not have a huge amount of internal people to pull on, but you need to have a look at your internal talent pipeline, look at the skills where you can upskill, cross-skill, and look at all the options that you've got internally before you're going out externally, because it could be that you've got opportunity within your own business. Employee referrals are great, but just a caution with relying too much on employee referrals is because usually you get people that are like those people that are like those people, and so you can have an impact on your diversity here. And so I think it's really important that it's great to have employee referrals because it's 40% cheaper basically than using an agency. But what you don't want to do is dilute your diverse talent pools, because you're kind of using employee referrals. Improve your employer brand. So there was an article, and I've used this stat before, but you can, if you've got a strong employer brand, that can reduce your cost per hire by 50%, because what you're doing is that you're attracting people organically into your business. You're also going to be attracting the people that are right for your business. If you're talking using messaging that's authentic, true to your brand, true to the culture that you've got, then you'll attract the right people. And then when they join, just make sure you're selling what they're buying. So just making sure that when someone joins, you haven't just done all the bells and whistles externally saying we do all this great stuff, but then actually when they turn up, it's not quite like that. One of the highest reasons for people leaving businesses is due to cultural fit and people just not getting what they signed up for, basically. And employer branding is incredibly powerful, but we just need to make sure that we're being having integrity and being ethical about what we're saying, not just to kind of drive sales. And then skills market mapping and sourcing strategies. So talent mapping is an excellent way to create targeted sourcing strategies. And so what you can do is to determine where you're likely to hire people into your business, where you might have harder to fill roles and niche skill sets. And by doing this, what you can identify is, what can you fill yourself directly, and then what might you want to go out to an agency with. Agencies have their place. They will always be needed in recruitment because of their niche skill sets, because they are deeply embedded in their industries. They have candidate pools to match that, and they nurture them and have really good relationships with them. And so I will never come on and say that you can do absolutely everything internally and you shouldn't use agencies, because actually I think there's really good relationship and balance to be had. And if you find that you do need to go out to agency, again, just making sure that you've not only got the right fees and rates and what have you, but you're getting a partnership from someone, that you're going to get market insights, they're on board with your values, your business goals, and they want to help support that growth and getting the right people. And I think when you find that relationship, it can be really powerful. But I think agency spend is so high because typically people will just send it out to agencies before doing the skills mapping, looking at the market, get a heat map. How would you attract people in that area? What's the strategy? There's loads of really good tools out there that you can use that can give you those insights. LinkedIn Insights is one of them, but you've also got many others as well. So Horsefly being one of them. I'm an unofficial champion of Horsefly analytics. I think it's absolutely fantastic platform. So if you want to chat about that at all, let me know. So then moving on to the screening and selection process. So, optimizing your hiring process is absolutely key. So Glassdoor did a survey and they said that if you were to reduce your time to hire from 42 days, which is very typical, to 25 days, you could save up to 500 grand annually, obviously depending on the size of the business and the volume. But that is due to reduced advertising costs, reducing the amount of time that your internal teams need to spend hiring these roles, interviewers' time, all of that stuff. And so if you can really optimize your end-to-end, looking at your SLAs, your KPIs, looking at where you get your best conversions, all of that stuff will help to reduce that time to hire. Using the right assessments and structure. So don't use the same interview process for everyone. You guys are in talent acquisition, so that will be an obvious one for you. But I think some businesses just kind of do a carbon copy of processes. And so you might have someone junior going through 3 interview stages and then more senior doing the same thing. And so making sure that you're finding the right structure for each of the roles that you're looking for, spend the time to create specific assessments. And then obviously you've got AI, loads of AI, so much AI. The market is flooded with different AI technologies. Again, LinkedIn did a survey and it was you can reduce hiring time by like 75% by using AI. And that's great. But I think the important thing for us to be saying to our clients and to our stakeholders is there's so much AI out there, but it really does depend on the recruitment delivery model that you've got, the volumes that you're working with, the resources that you've got within the team, and then finding the right AI that's actually going to be complementary to your processes and to your current tech stack. Because it can be a bit of a minefield because there are so many vendors out there now and everyone's selling you bells and whistles. And what we need to do is kind of strip our processes and identify where will AI enhance what we're doing, how will we make sure that we're keeping the human in the loop and making sure that we've got that person or people experience embedded in those processes whilst being forward thinking using automation to speed up our time, but without losing that quality. And I think having like a genuine deep dive review on these things is really important. I've been asked a couple of times by clients giving me really vague um, information about, well, what do you think is the best technology to use? What's the best HCM systems to use and AI? And it all depends. Every question they asked me was kind of, it all depends on all of those different factors. But I do think having a strategic partner to be able to kind of guide you through that process is really important. And then offer and onboarding. So negotiating salaries and then just keeping track of salaries, like who does the approvals of each of the salaries that you're offering? Does it come through HR? Do hiring managers have free rein to make those offers? Are you keeping track of it? Do you then look back at your budget and say, okay, well, how much are we spending on recruitment? What's our forecasted salary cost going to be for that year? Are we going to blow any money that we've got before we do anything else? Is really important, and just making sure that you're doing benchmarking exercises in the talent mapping stage, because that will really help to identify like what you're going to need to be able to pay people to be competitive, and that helps you kind of just build your frameworks internally. The other bit is I call it the black hole, and if you're in slightly bigger organizations, is the recruitment team offer a candidate, that candidate accepts, and then recruitment go, cool, I'm on to my next role, I need to just crack on with that, and then might drop in here and there of the candidate. The HR or onboarding team, if you're lucky to have 2 or 3 departments looking after these things, will go, oh, recruitment are looking after that, they're starting on this day, and so the candidate falls into a bit of a black hole, and they're not getting lots of communication. No one's really taking ownership of that candidate because everyone's flinging it back over the fence. And so that collaboration between HR, onboarding, L&D, recruitment, whoever it is, that whatever your process is, just making sure that you've got a really good communication plan, because you end up losing a lot of candidates during that black hole period because they don't feel engaged. They've probably got other offers on the table. They've got options. And so the people not starting on day one is a huge cost to the business as well. And so it's really important for you to kind of invest in that period of time as well, and kind of look at it holistically. And then again, working with HR to look at the data set. So who have you hired from a recruitment perspective? Where did they come from? So what sources are good? How well do they convert? What's your time to hire? And then speaking to HR to say, okay, well, out of all these hires, who's stayed? Who is still in the business? How many people did we lose in the first 90 days? Because that's a typical period of time when the wrong hires would leave. And what were the reasons if you do exit interviews? And that reviewing and reflecting and then adapting your processes to try and improve the end-to-end experience, again, will just save you money in the long run, and also strengthen the relationship between the two teams, because we can often work a bit in silos. But I think, this is a really good way of, I'm not saying to invest in anything here. This is looking at what you've got already in your business and looking how to improve and optimize, and make it a more efficient process, improve the collaboration. Once you've done this, you'll find that you've probably been able to make some really good changes that make a really big impact to your cost per hire, time to hire, and retention rates. Once you've kind of done that, then you can think about, where do I want to invest, and you can make more informed decisions. Otherwise, it's kind of just throwing money at a problem that you're not quite sure what it is, and what is the best solution to solve it. And so I'm a big advocate on the power of the process. So hopefully you guys are too.
Definitely. All about the process in recruitment.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
I think what you'll find in kind of smaller businesses is where you don't have a recruitment team, and so you've got HR doing recruitment side of desk, or you've got hiring managers maybe in startups where you've got founders and what have you doing that recruitment, and so they don't come from this background, they don't necessarily understand the nuances but in the recruitment process, and where you can make tweaks to improve costs and what have you. And insourcing a recruitment team isn't going to be harder work than outsourcing it, or vice versa, but it's just having the knowledge of, how do you create a process that's right for your business. And so, I think for us on the call, we're in a unique position to be able to help advise our clients on this stuff. And then with candidate quality, I mean, there's been huge discussions around skills first hiring. So, it's moving away from what school did you go to, what qualifications did you get? Did you go to an Ivy League university? Where are the big name companies that you've worked at, and that experiential side? And very much need to start focusing on the skills that are needed. And I read an article which I spoke about at my last event, and by 2030, we think the skills needed today versus in 2030 will change by 60 something percent. I think it was 63%. And so we need to really not only focus on the skills that we don't have in our businesses and the skills we think we're going to need for the future, but we need to then balance that with human skills, the ability to learn new skills, to be curious, to have aptitude to learn new skills, to have a desire to want to do that, to have critical thinking. That these human skills now are going to be the things that complement AI, automation, and technology as the skills evolve. And so having really shifting around what are the technical skills you need now, and this is going to really feed into workforce planning as well, and looking ahead, and recruitment teams being part of that and having a seat at the table at these leadership meetings about how we're going to kind of bridge those gaps in the future, as well as, well, what are the soft skills, and then how would we upskill people within our businesses? Again, that collaboration between L&D and recruitment is going to be key, I think. Again, the skills mapping, making sure that you know where they're available. If they're not, what can you build, borrow, buy? What can you automate? You've got agentic AI now. You could even create an agent who could do some of these tasks for you that maybe don't exist in the market. And the other thing is around technology and AI is, going back to my last point, is AI can do a lot around CV screening, application screening, running assessments, etc. But just making sure you're having that human element overlaid on all of this. One of the things that's really important around, again, like diversity, is that AI can be inherently biased because of the way that it's created. It's based on historical information. So if that historical information has societal leans in certain ways in society, has gendered imbalances or whatever it is, it's based on historical information, which isn't always the most inclusive. And people that are building the AI will have their own bias as well, and that being built into algorithms for certain outcomes and what have you. And so, all of us humans have bias as well. I'm not saying that it's only going to be AI, but balancing the two together will ensure that you're kind of covering your bases and making sure that you're still being inclusive, even though you're investing in all of this technology. And then lastly, it's not tech and AI related, but also just having hiring managers do structured interviews to make sure you're getting the right people. The amount of clients that I've worked with where they kind of just have a chat with someone, there is no real structure, or they'll use it loosely, and just making sure that we're not letting people go rogue, because you can improve your accuracy in hiring by 57% if you're being more structured and more thoughtful and considerate about the questions you're asking and why you're asking them. And that's the same for cultural alignment. We should be asking value-based questions in our interviews that are going to pull out the attributes and qualities in a person that we think is going to align in our business and what our goals are. And not just looking for culture fit, but looking for culture add. So what can this person add to our culture? What value can this person add to our business? Because just asking for someone to fit in isn't necessarily what we want. We want people that can add value, be disruptive in a good way, challenge the status quo, those types of things to help drive businesses forwards. So just kind of looking beyond the CV and looking for that potential in people as well, I think is going to be a real key for hiring quality candidates. And these are all things you can do without spending money. This is, apart from the time on the job to kind of build these things out. So I'm going to talk about a case study now. So obviously the last 7 years I've been in professional services, but I wanted to pull out a case study from years before that. So this is about 9 years old, this case study, and it's in a hospitality business, which again, I haven't worked in for a really long time. But it's a really good example of how recruitment can save so much money. So this business was a headcount of around 500 people. They had two sites, one in Pall Mall, one in Epsom. They didn't have an internal recruitment function, so everything was managed by HR. So back to what I was saying earlier about that side of desk, lots of this stuff was being thrown over to agencies, job boards, and anyway, just throw a job description. And they had a huge turnover. Their attrition was insane. Industry is a factor to that, not just because of the recruitment processes, but they also had a high volume summer campaign where they got a golf course, and so they do big events over the summer. So they always have to flex up in the summer, flex back down again. So they need that temporary kind of staffing solutions during summertime, and they were spending over 200 grand a year. And so I was brought in to build a recruitment function. So the outcomes of me going in and doing that was I reduced their hiring spend by 50%. So I saved them 100 grand in that first year, which was kind of doing what I've gone through in this presentation. It was, even though that was 9 years ago, that the power of really going through an end-to-end and re-engineering that process is so critical in identifying where you're spending money, where you're losing time, where you're getting frustrations, across hiring teams, which is poor morale, all of these things. So what I did here was did the end-to-end process for engineering, in-sourced recruitment. So I was managing all of the recruitment, spent a lot of time on their employer branding, set up a PSL for them as well, renegotiated all the terms with agencies, stripped it right back because they had an insane amount of agencies working for them for the size of their business. And I'll go through these steps because otherwise I'll just jump around. But the idea is that you kind of spend a bit of planning time with them and doing deep dives into what are they doing right now? Where are the risks? Where are the opportunities? They didn't have an ATS system. Everything was done manually. GDPR nightmare, and also no way of tracking like how you're performing at all. So kind of going from a bit of a blank page, but looking at that process map, identifying where we're likely to find the best candidates for the type of jobs that we were hiring, implementing a new ATS system, creating a careers website, getting social media presence, all of that, bringing that in-house and doing the PSL and the terms of business, and then operating with a consistent procedure, processes, systems, ended up us saving 100 grand. So there's a lot more in that as well. But there was also a huge issue with attrition. And I think that's where the head of HR that hired me, myself and her worked very closely together to create a strategy, which was my continuous improvement strategy after I left, after I think I was there for 18 months. That continuous improvement strategy was all about enhancing the things that I'd already set up there, so the new things I'd implemented, but also around the collaboration piece with HR, with the multiple teams. So each department was almost run in its own way. If you worked in one restaurant in the facility, you get a great experience. If you worked in another restaurant, maybe you didn't have as good an experience. And that was, there was two clubhouses, so that was different in every one. So if you've got 30 departments, there's like 60 departments, and then all the hiring managers. It was just crazy trying to kind of bring everyone in on, okay, this is recruitment governance. This is the process we want you to follow. These are your roles and responsibilities. This is what we'll do in recruitment and HR, but this is what we need you to do operationally to be able to sustain this type of process. And it took 18 months for us to embed that, but it was a successful experience and project. So and funnily enough, I'm still in touch with that HR director that was there. She no longer works there, but I created the continuous improvement board paper, and she's still kind of takes that with her to different businesses that she goes to now, which is great. Yeah, I think it's just a good way of showing that, going from no process whatsoever, how much an impact it can have to just put some rigor around it. And I know, even though I was there for 18 months and that 100 grand was saved in that first year, they would have been continuing to save more if they was continuing to invest in, their process, re-engineering it, reviewing it, investing in new tech, candidate experience, that type of thing. I've also done similar things in PwC and with clients of PwC as well, where I've optimized their processes, allowed them to hire. I think I've reduced their hiring time by 23% in the team that I led, managed to hire 1,000 people in 6 months for a global FMCG company that was being bought out due to an acquisition. And everything I talk about goes back to process, managing your spend, managing your efficiencies, can make a really, really big impact. And so I would highly recommend you all do the same. Yeah, so the action plan really is, very simple. Audit your current spend. Where are you spending the money? Where do you get the best conversions? Where are you losing money and not getting an ROI? What can you do internally to change some of the ways that you're working? Optimize your process. So stripping it right back to, okay, what do we even look for on a job description? What are the hiring managers asking for? Are we just completely off the mark here? How do we then advertise? Where do we advertise? All the way through to, okay, we now want to offer this person. How do we manage that cost control with negotiating salaries? Leverage your internal teams. You've got huge amounts of talent in your internal teams, their networks as well. Switch to skills first hiring as soon as you can. My view here is that you start internally and do a bit of a skills taxonomy internally, and then look at where your gaps are, and then that will help you identify or create a strategy externally, and then implement AI that will complement your model. Don't just buy it off the shelf because it's got bells and whistles on it. Seek some advice and make sure you're getting the right AI for you. And those are all of my points that I wanted to go through today. So thank you for running through that with me. But yeah, any questions that you've got, I'm happy to answer them.